The porch light was the only thing shining for miles, and before the night was over, it would change 4 lives forever. Snow fell sideways across the Wyoming plains, driven by a bitter wind that rattled fences and swept white curtains across the empty road. The storm had arrived faster than the forecast predicted. By 9 o'clock, most people were already inside, gathered around fireplaces and warm kitchens, waiting for morning. But not everyone had a place to wait. Nearly 3 miles outside the small town of Red Creek stood an aging ranch surrounded by open fields and dark cottonwood trees. A single yellow light glowed above the front porch, casting a circle of warmth onto the drifting snow. Inside, Cole Bennett sat alone at a wooden table, a mug of black coffee cooling beside him. At 55, the retired Navy SEAL had grown used to silence. The house creaked softly around him. Wind pressed against the windows. The old clock above the fireplace ticked steadily through the evening. That was usually enough company. It had been years since anyone knocked on his door after dark. Years since laughter filled the rooms. Years since he stopped expecting visitors. Across the room, a large German shepherd named Atlas lay near the fireplace. His sable coat reflected the firelight in shades of gold and black. One ear twitched as a gust of wind rattled the front porch. Atlas lifted his head. Cole barely noticed. The dog often reacted to sounds long before humans could hear them. Then Atlas stood. Slowly. Deliberately. His eyes fixed on the front door. Cole frowned. What is it? Atlas remained motionless. Listening. Outside, the storm continued its steady assault on the ranch. Snow swirled through the darkness. The road beyond the property had disappeared beneath white drifts. No vehicles. No lights. No reason for concern. Yet Atlas continued staring toward the entrance. A moment later came the sound. 3 quiet knocks. Cole froze. The sound seemed almost impossible. Nobody came this far out during weather like this. Another knock followed. Softer this time. Hesitant. Atlas walked to the door and sat. Cole rose from his chair. Every instinct developed through decades of military service remained alive beneath the surface. Cautious. Alert. Observant. He crossed the room and looked through the small glass panel beside the entrance. At first he saw only blowing snow. Then a shape emerged from the darkness. Actually, 3 shapes. A woman. And 2 children. They stood beneath the porch light, bundled in winter coats dusted with snow. The younger child appeared no older than 7. The older one maybe 10. The woman held them close against the wind. Cole opened the door halfway. Freezing air rushed inside immediately. The woman looked exhausted. Her face was pale from cold. Snow clung to her hair and shoulders. Yet her eyes carried something deeper than exhaustion. Worry. The kind that comes after too many difficult days. For a few seconds nobody spoke. Then she swallowed hard and asked the question that would echo in Cole's mind for months afterward. Please, she said quietly. Can we stay in your barn tonight? The younger child lowered his gaze. The older girl squeezed her mother's hand tighter. Cole looked beyond them. No car. No headlights. Nothing but darkness and blowing snow. Where is your vehicle? He asked. The woman hesitated. A few miles back. It stopped running. Wind howled across the ranch. Snow drifted against the porch steps. Cole felt old instincts urging caution. He lived alone. He trusted very few people. Experience had taught him that not every story was true. Not every stranger deserved an open door. He was about to answer when something unexpected happened. Atlas stepped forward. The German shepherd moved past Cole and approached the family. The younger boy stiffened. The woman looked nervous. But Atlas showed no aggression. No uncertainty. He walked directly to the little girl and gently lowered his head beside her mitten-covered hand. The wind pushed another wave of snow across the porch as Cole stood silently in the doorway. Atlas remained seated beside the little girl, calm and unmoving, as though he had already decided the family belonged there. The woman pulled her coat tighter around her children. Her hands trembled from cold. The younger boy tried to appear brave, but his cheeks were red from the freezing air and exhaustion weighed heavily in his eyes. Cole looked from the children to the dark road beyond the ranch. Nothing could survive long out there tonight without shelter. He knew that much. Finally, he stepped aside. "The barn is warm enough," he said. Relief flooded the woman's face so quickly it almost hurt to watch. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Atlas immediately stood and walked toward the yard as if leading the way. Cole grabbed a lantern hanging near the door and headed into the storm. The family followed closely behind. Snow crunched beneath their boots. The barn sat about 50 yards from the house, a large red structure weathered by decades of Wyoming winters. Years earlier, Cole had converted one section into a clean storage area filled with hay, blankets, and supplies. It was not luxurious, but it was dry, protected, and warmer than the road. As they stepped inside, the smell of wood, hay, and old timber replaced the sharp bite of winter air. The children looked around with wide eyes. To them, it probably felt like a castle. The woman brushed snow from her coat and finally introduced herself. "My name is Rachel Turner." She placed a gentle hand on each child's shoulder. "This is Emma and this is Noah." Cole nodded once. "Cole Bennett." The children glanced toward Atlas. The German shepherd had already settled near a stack of hay bales, watching them quietly. Emma smiled for the first time. It transformed her face completely. "Your dog is beautiful." Cole looked at Atlas. He usually keeps his distance from strangers. Rachel seemed surprised. "Then why is he being so nice to us?" Cole did not have an answer. Atlas lowered his head into Emma's lap. The little girl giggled softly. The sound echoed through the barn like something forgotten. Cole felt an unexpected ache in his chest. It had been years since he heard a child laugh on this property. Years since sounds like that belonged here. He handed them several blankets and pointed toward a section of clean hay near a portable heater. "You can sleep there tonight." Rachel's eyes glistened with gratitude. "We will be gone first thing in the morning." Cole simply nodded. Yet something about the certainty in her voice sounded less like confidence and more like hope she was trying desperately to hold together. A few minutes later he returned to the house. Atlas remained behind. That surprised him even more. Usually the dog followed him everywhere. Tonight, however, Atlas refused to leave the children. Cole watched through a small window in the barn door. Emma sat beside the German shepherd with one hand resting on his fur. Noah leaned against his mother. For the first time since arriving, they looked safe. Back inside the house, Cole poured another cup of coffee and sat beside the fireplace. Snow tapped against the windows. The old clock continued its steady rhythm. Yet the ranch felt different now. Less empty somehow. He tried reading a book. He tried listening to the weather report. Neither held his attention. His thoughts kept drifting back to the family in the barn. Who were they really? Where had they come from? Why had they ended up knocking on a stranger's door in the middle of a blizzard? If you are enjoying this story so far, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss more unforgettable journeys like this one. Hours passed. Near midnight, Cole stepped outside to check on the heater. The storm had eased slightly. Snowflakes drifted gently through the darkness. He opened the barn door quietly. The sight inside stopped him cold. Rachel and Noah were asleep beneath thick blankets. Emma had fallen asleep beside Atlas, one small hand still resting against the dog's shoulder. Atlas remained awake. Guarding them. Watching the door. Watching the windows. Watching everything. The German shepherd lifted his head when he saw Cole. For a moment neither moved. Then Atlas looked toward the sleeping family and back at him again. The message was unmistakable. They are safe now. Cole closed the door softly and stood alone beneath the stars beginning to appear between the clouds. He did not know it yet, but somewhere inside that barn rested a secret connected to a chapter of his life he thought had ended forever. Morning arrived quietly over the ranch. The storm had moved east during the night, leaving behind a world transformed by fresh snow and pale winter sunlight. Long shadows stretched across the fields. Frost sparkled on fence posts. The air carried the clean scent of pine, cedar, and cold earth resting beneath a blanket of white. Cole stood on the porch with a steaming mug of coffee in his hands. From where he stood, he could see the barn across the yard. Thin wisps of smoke drifted from a vent near the roof where the portable heater continued to run. Everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful, perhaps. The kind of peace that often arrives before life changes direction. Across the yard, the barn door opened slowly. Rachel stepped outside first. She looked exhausted, but no longer frightened. Emma followed close behind, bundled in an oversized coat. Noah emerged last, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Atlas walked beside them as though he had belonged with them for years. The sight felt strangely natural. Cole did not like how natural it felt. He had spent years building a life without surprises. A predictable routine. A quiet existence. Yet less than 12 hours after their arrival, his German shepherd seemed determined to rewrite every rule. The family crossed the snowy yard toward the house. Atlas trotted beside Emma, occasionally brushing against her shoulder. The little girl smiled every time he did. Inside the kitchen, the smell of bacon, eggs, and fresh coffee soon filled the air. Rachel offered to help, but Cole waved her toward the table. "You are guests." Rachel looked uncomfortable hearing the word. Guests implied belonging. Stability. Temporary comfort. Judging by her expression, those things had become unfamiliar. During breakfast, conversation came slowly. Noah focused entirely on pancakes. Emma occasionally whispered questions to Atlas as if the dog understood every word. Perhaps he did. Cole answered simple questions about the ranch. Rachel answered very little about herself. Not because she was rude. More because she seemed careful. Like someone carrying burdens she was not ready to share. After the meal, the children followed Atlas outside. Cole watched through the kitchen window. The German shepherd chased snowballs, nudged Emma upright when she slipped in a drift, and patiently tolerated Noah's attempts to race him across the yard. Their laughter drifted through the cold air. It echoed across the property. Cole could not remember the last time his ranch sounded like that. Rachel stood beside him at the sink. For a moment neither spoke. Then she quietly said, "I cannot remember the last time they laughed this much." Cole glanced toward the window. Emma was throwing handfuls of snow into the air while Atlas barked playfully beneath the falling crystals. Noah laughed so hard he nearly fell over. Something about the sight softened even the hardest corners of the morning. "Kids deserve reasons to laugh," Cole said. Rachel lowered her eyes. "Life has not given them many lately." The words lingered between them. Before Cole could respond, movement outside caught his attention. Atlas had suddenly stopped playing. The German shepherd stood perfectly still near the fence line. His ears pointed toward the barn. His body had gone rigid. The change was immediate. 1 second playful. The next intensely focused. Cole felt a familiar sensation tighten inside his chest. Atlas only acted like that when something captured his attention. Emma noticed it too. She pointed toward the dog. "What is he doing?" Noah asked. Atlas ignored the children completely. He turned and began walking toward the barn. Not running. Not excited. Purposeful. Cole set down his coffee. Through years of living together, he had learned to trust the dog's instincts. Atlas reached the barn entrance and stopped. He stared at something near the doorway. Then he looked back toward the house. Toward Cole. Once. Twice. Waiting. Calling. Cole stepped outside into the cold. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he crossed the yard. Atlas remained beside the barn door. The dog did not move when Cole approached. Instead, he lowered his head toward a small object half buried in snow near the entrance. At first it looked like nothing more than an old photograph. Weathered. Slightly bent. Probably dropped during the storm. But when Cole picked it up and brushed away the snow, the color drained from his face. The image showed a smiling soldier standing beside a German shepherd. The photograph was old. At least 15 years old. Yet Cole recognized the man instantly. Because he had once trusted that man with his life. The photograph felt heavier than paper should have. Cole stood beside the barn door staring at the image while cold wind drifted across the yard. The smiling soldier in the picture looked younger than the man preserved in Cole's memories, but there was no mistake. The strong jaw. The easy grin. The calm confidence in his eyes. It was Mason Reed. For a moment the ranch around him seemed to disappear. The snow-covered fields faded. The sound of Emma and Noah playing somewhere behind him faded. Even Atlas became distant. All Cole could see was a face from another lifetime. A face he had not expected to see again. Atlas sat quietly beside him, watching. The German shepherd seemed almost satisfied, as though he had wanted Cole to find the photograph. Cole turned it over. The back contained faint writing, worn by years and weather. Most of it had faded away, but one line remained partially visible. Family is everything. Cole swallowed hard. Mason used to say that. He said it during long deployments. He said it during training exercises. He said it every time conversations drifted toward home. Family is everything. The words echoed through years of memories. Footsteps approached through the snow. Rachel stepped out of the barn carrying a folded blanket. She noticed the photograph immediately. Her expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. "Where did you find that?" she asked softly. Cole held it up. Near the barn door. Rachel stared at the image for several seconds. Then she lowered her eyes. "I have been looking for that." Cole studied her face. Questions crowded his mind. Too many questions. Atlas rose and walked over to Rachel. The dog leaned gently against her side. Rachel rested one hand on his head without thinking. The gesture looked natural. Familiar. Cole noticed it. "You know the man in this picture," he said. Rachel nodded slowly. Snowflakes drifted from the roof and landed silently around them. "Yes." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I do." Cole waited. The old instinct to gather information returned. Patient. Quiet. Observant. Rachel took a deep breath and looked toward the distant mountains. "My father told me stories about him when I was little." Cole felt something tighten inside his chest. "Your father knew Mason Reed?" Rachel nodded again. "Very well." The answer only deepened the mystery. Cole had spent years believing certain chapters of his life were closed forever. Yet somehow a woman and 2 children had appeared during a snowstorm carrying a photograph connected to one of the most important people he had ever known. The coincidence felt impossible. Emma and Noah came running across the yard with Atlas following behind them. Emma stopped when she saw the photograph. "Mom, is that the picture?" Rachel smiled faintly. "Yes." Emma looked at Cole. "Grandpa used to keep that picture on his desk." Cole froze. The world seemed to tilt slightly beneath his feet. "Grandpa." The word lingered in the cold air. Rachel saw the confusion in his eyes. She looked down for a moment before speaking. "The man in that picture helped save my father's life many years ago." Cole said nothing. Rachel continued. "My father never forgot him." Atlas sat between them, calm and attentive. The children listened without fully understanding why the conversation suddenly mattered so much. Rachel folded her arms against the cold. After my father passed away last year, I found old letters. Old photographs. Stories I had never heard before. Her eyes drifted toward the image again. Mason Reed was part of all of them. Cole looked at the photograph. Then at Rachel. Then back at the photograph. The pieces refused to fit together. Yet they were clearly connected somehow. The winter sun climbed higher above the ranch. Light reflected across the snow in dazzling waves of silver and gold. Everything looked peaceful. But inside Cole's mind, a storm far larger than the one from the night before had begun to form. Atlas suddenly stood. His ears lifted. His attention shifted toward the far side of the property. Then he started walking. Not toward the house. Not toward the road. Toward an old storage shed near the edge of the ranch. The same shed Cole had not opened in years. Atlas stopped halfway there and looked back. Waiting. The same look he had given beside the photograph. The same look that said he wanted Cole to follow. And for reasons he could not explain, Cole felt certain the dog was leading him toward another piece of the past he thought had been buried forever. Atlas moved across the snow-covered yard with steady determination. He did not run. He did not look back repeatedly the way an excited dog might. Instead, he walked with the quiet certainty of someone following a destination already known. Cole watched him disappear toward the far edge of the property where an aging storage shed stood beneath a row of cottonwood trees. The building had once served as a workshop. Years ago it held tools, equipment, and memories Cole had not wanted to face. Eventually he locked the door and stopped going inside altogether. Time and weather had done the rest. Snow covered much of the roof now. Frost clung to the windows. The place looked forgotten. Yet Atlas continued toward it without hesitation. Rachel followed several steps behind Cole. Emma and Noah stayed close to their mother. None of them fully understood what was happening. But they all sensed something important unfolding. The winter sun hung low above the ranch, casting long golden beams across the snow. The world felt strangely quiet. Atlas stopped at the shed door. He sat. Then he looked directly at Cole. Waiting. Cole stared at the weathered building. A knot formed in his chest. He had not opened that door in nearly 15 years. Some memories become easier to ignore when they remain hidden. But standing there beside Atlas, with Mason Reed's photograph still tucked inside his jacket pocket, ignoring the past no longer felt possible. He stepped forward. Snow crunched beneath his boots. The old metal latch resisted at first. Then it gave way with a soft groan. The door opened inward. Dust floated through shafts of sunlight. The scent of aged wood, oil, and forgotten years drifted into the cold air. Inside, everything remained exactly where he had left it. Shelves lined the walls. Old equipment rested beneath canvas covers. Boxes sat stacked in corners untouched by time. For a moment nobody spoke. Atlas entered first. His claws clicked softly against the wooden floor. The German shepherd moved slowly through the room, sniffing here and there, until he stopped beside an old military storage trunk positioned beneath a workbench. Cole froze. The trunk was olive green. Scuffed. Worn. Familiar. He knew it instantly. It had belonged to Mason. Years earlier, after a deployment ended, several personal belongings had been delivered to Cole for safekeeping. He had never found the strength to sort through them. The trunk remained exactly as it arrived. Closed. Silent. Waiting. Atlas placed one paw against the side of the box. Then he looked up. Rachel inhaled sharply. Emma squeezed Noah's hand. Even the children seemed to understand the moment carried unusual weight. Cole knelt slowly. Dust coated the metal surface. His fingers traced a faded name stenciled across the lid. Mason Reed. The letters appeared worn but unmistakable. Memories flooded back. Long conversations. Shared missions. Endless laughter around campfires and training grounds. Mason had possessed the rare ability to bring warmth into difficult places. He spoke often about family. About loyalty. About protecting the people who mattered most. Family is everything. The words echoed again inside Cole's mind. His hands trembled slightly as he released the latches. The trunk opened with a soft metallic click. Inside rested neatly organized belongings preserved by time. Photographs. Letters. A folded American flag. Small keepsakes collected through years of service. Rachel stepped closer. Her eyes filled with emotion. Then Cole noticed something resting near the top. A sealed envelope. Unlike everything else, it appeared untouched. Across the front, written in Mason's unmistakable handwriting, were only a few words. For Cole Bennett. If you are reading this, it matters. Silence filled the shed. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Cole stared at the envelope. 15 years. 15 years it had waited. Atlas sat beside him quietly. The German shepherd's amber eyes never left the letter. As though this had been the destination all along. As though every step of the journey, every coincidence, every unexpected meeting had led directly to this moment. Cole carefully lifted the envelope from the trunk. The paper felt fragile. Important. Heavy with something far greater than words. And for the first time since Rachel and her children arrived at the ranch, he began to suspect their appearance during the storm had not been random at all. For a long moment, nobody moved. The winter sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of the shed, turning tiny particles in the air into floating gold. Cole sat on the wooden floor with the envelope resting in his hands. 15 years. 15 years of silence sealed behind a few folds of paper. Atlas remained beside him, calm and patient, as if he understood the importance of what was about to happen. Rachel stood nearby with Emma and Noah. The children sensed the seriousness of the moment and remained unusually quiet. Outside, a light breeze stirred the cottonwood branches, but inside the shed the world felt suspended in time. Slowly, carefully, Cole opened the envelope. The paper inside had yellowed slightly with age. The handwriting was unmistakable. Mason Reed. Every letter carried the same confidence and warmth Cole remembered from years ago. He began reading. The first few lines spoke of friendship, loyalty, and gratitude. Mason thanked Cole for standing beside him during some of the hardest moments of his life. He wrote about lessons learned, mistakes made, and the people who mattered most. As Cole continued, his throat tightened. It felt less like reading a letter and more like hearing an old friend speak from across the years. Then he reached a paragraph that changed everything. Mason wrote that if life ever separated them and if his family ever needed help, he hoped Cole would not turn them away. He described family as the greatest responsibility a person could ever carry. Family is everything. The same words again. The same belief that had guided him through life. Cole lowered the paper for a moment and stared at the floor. Memories flooded through him. Campfires beneath endless skies. Long conversations after difficult days. Mason talking about the future. About children he hoped to raise. About the home he wanted to build someday. Cole had listened back then, but perhaps he had never fully understood. Now he did. He returned to the letter. Near the bottom, another sentence caught his attention. It was simple. Direct. Written with complete certainty. If this letter ever reaches you, it means my family has found their way to you for a reason. The words settled over the room like sunlight. Rachel covered her mouth with one hand. Tears filled her eyes. Emma leaned gently against her mother. Noah looked from one adult to the other, trying to understand why a piece of paper carried so much emotion. Cole read the final line slowly. Mason wrote about hope. About second chances. About how people often arrive in each other's lives exactly when they are needed most. Then the letter ended. No dramatic farewell. No grand speech. Just a signature and one final message. Keep the light on for them. Silence followed. The kind of silence that feels full rather than empty. Atlas rested his head on Cole's knee. The gesture broke something loose inside him. For years he had lived behind walls built from grief and loneliness. After losing his wife and daughter, he convinced himself that isolation was safer. Easier. He stopped expecting good things. Stopped expecting people. Yet somehow a snowstorm had delivered a struggling family to his doorstep carrying a message from the past he never knew existed. Rachel wiped away tears and finally spoke. My father always said Mason changed his life. Cole looked up. Your father knew him well? Rachel nodded. When my father was young, he went through a very difficult period. Mason helped him rebuild. He never forgot that kindness. She smiled sadly. After my father passed away, I found old journals and letters. They all spoke about the same tea. The remainder of the afternoon passed beneath a sky of pale blue and drifting clouds. Snow melted slowly from the ranch roofs as sunlight warmed the valley. Yet something had changed inside the old house. The rooms no longer felt as empty. Voices moved through them. Laughter appeared unexpectedly. Footsteps crossed floors that had known only silence for years. Cole noticed every difference. He noticed Emma humming while helping Rachel wash dishes. He noticed Noah sitting on the living room rug throwing a tennis ball for Atlas. He noticed himself listening for those sounds instead of avoiding them. Atlas seemed to notice it too. The German shepherd moved comfortably between every room of the house, checking on each person as if he had accepted responsibility for all of them. Late that evening, a fire crackled softly inside the stone fireplace. Outside, the Wyoming plains stretched beneath a blanket of stars. The storm felt like a distant memory now. Rachel sat quietly in a rocking chair near the window. Cole remained across the room, staring into the fire. Emma and Noah had already fallen asleep in the guest room. Atlas lay stretched across the floor between them. For several minutes neither adult spoke. The comfortable silence reminded Cole of years long gone. Finally Rachel broke it. I never expected any of this. Her voice was soft. Thoughtful. Cole glanced toward her. Neither did I. Rachel smiled faintly. When the car broke down, I thought we were finished. I kept telling the kids everything would be okay, but honestly, I did not know if it would. The firelight danced across her face. There was honesty there now. No walls. No careful distance. Just exhaustion and gratitude. Cole understood that look. He had worn it himself once. Rachel folded her hands together. My father always believed people appear in your life for a reason. Cole looked toward the envelope resting on the mantel above the fireplace. Mason's letter seemed almost alive in the warm glow. Mine used to say something similar. Rachel followed his gaze. Maybe they were right. Atlas suddenly lifted his head. His ears twitched toward the hallway. A moment later small footsteps appeared. Emma stood in the doorway wrapped in a blanket. Her hair was slightly messy from sleep. She looked at Atlas first, then at the adults. I had a dream. Rachel smiled. A good one? Emma nodded. We were living on a farm. The room grew quiet. The little girl stepped closer to the fireplace. There were horses and dogs and trees everywhere. She looked down at Atlas. And we stayed. Rachel's eyes filled with emotion. She quickly looked away. Cole felt something tighten in his chest. Children often said simple things that adults spent years trying to understand. Emma sat beside Atlas and rested her head against his shoulder. The German shepherd did not move. He simply remained there, steady and comforting. After a few minutes, Emma looked up. Can I ask something? Cole nodded. Of course. The little girl hesitated. Then she asked the question so quietly it almost disappeared beneath the crackling fire. Do you think people can get a second family? No one spoke. Even the fire seemed to settle. Rachel closed her eyes briefly. Cole stared into the flames. The question carried more weight than Emma realized. Years of loneliness. Years of loss. Years of believing certain chapters were finished forever. All of it seemed to gather inside that single sentence. Atlas rose slowly and crossed the room. He stopped beside Emma and gently rested his head in her lap. The little girl smiled and wrapped her arms around his neck. Cole watched the scene unfold. The dog needed no words. Somehow he always knew exactly what people needed. Rachel wiped away a tear. The room remained silent for several seconds. Then Cole finally answered. His voice was quiet. Honest. Yes. Emma looked up. Really? Cole nodded. Sometimes life takes people away. Sometimes it changes plans we thought would last forever. But that does not mean the story ends. The little girl smiled. Atlas's tail brushed softly against the floor. Outside, the stars shined above the dark Wyoming fields. Inside, warmth filled every corner of the house. And for the first time in many years, Cole realized he was no longer thinking about when the family would leave. He was beginning to wonder what the ranch would feel like if they did. The next morning arrived beneath a sky so clear it seemed impossible a blizzard had passed through only days earlier. Sunlight spilled across the ranch in waves of gold. Snow glistened on the fields. The distant mountains stood sharp against the horizon. Yet inside the house, Cole carried a quiet weight in his chest. Mason's letter remained folded in his jacket pocket. He had read it 3 more times before sunrise. Each reading revealed something new. Not new words. New meaning. Some messages waited for the right season of life before they could truly be understood. Atlas trotted beside him as he crossed the yard toward a small cottage tucked behind a line of cottonwood trees. The building had once belonged to his parents. Later it became a guest house. For years it sat mostly unused, visited only when repairs were necessary. The curtains remained closed. The porch swing rarely moved. Time seemed to pass around it without leaving much trace. Cole unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Dust floated through the sunlight streaming from the windows. The furniture remained covered. The fireplace sat cold. Yet the structure itself was solid. Warm. Welcoming. A home waiting for a purpose. Atlas wandered through the rooms, sniffing corners and doorways before settling beside the fireplace. His tail brushed gently against the floorboards. Cole stood in the center of the living room and looked around. For the first time, he saw the cottage differently. Not as an empty building. As a possibility. Hours later, Rachel stood on the porch of the main house helping Emma and Noah build a snowman near the fence. Their laughter drifted through the crisp winter air. Atlas moved between them like a patient guardian. Sometimes he chased a snowball. Sometimes he sat quietly beside the children. Every movement seemed effortless. Natural. As though he had always belonged among them. Cole watched from a distance. Then he made a decision. He walked toward the family. Rachel noticed the expression on his face immediately. The children sensed it too. Their laughter faded into curious silence. Even Atlas rose to his feet. The German shepherd looked from Cole to Rachel and back again. Waiting. Cole stopped a few feet away. For a moment he struggled to find the right words. Years of solitude had made important conversations difficult. Yet Mason's letter remained close to his heart. And some promises deserved to be honored. I want to show you something, he finally said. Rachel looked uncertain but nodded. Together they followed him across the property toward the cottage. Emma skipped ahead with Atlas. Noah walked beside his mother. The winter sun illuminated everything in warm shades of gold and white. When they reached the porch, Rachel frowned slightly. What is this place? Cole opened the door. "Come inside." The family stepped into the cottage. Emma immediately ran to the window overlooking the fields. Noah explored the small kitchen. Atlas settled beside the stone fireplace as though inspecting his new territory. Rachel remained near the entrance. Confused. Quiet. Cole took a slow breath. "It is not perfect." Rachel looked at him. "What do you mean?" He glanced around the room. "The roof needs a little work. The paint could use attention. The furniture is old." A faint smile touched his face. "But it is warm. It is safe. And it has been empty for too long." Rachel stared at him. Understanding began to form in her eyes. Cole reached into his pocket. A small ring of keys rested in his palm. The same keys that had hung untouched in his house for years. He held them out. "Stay here." Rachel blinked. "Cole." He gently shook his head. "Stay as long as you need." Tears appeared instantly. Rachel covered her mouth. Emma turned away from the window. Noah stopped moving. The room fell completely silent. Even the children understood the importance of the moment. Rachel looked at the keys but did not take them right away. "Why would you do this?" Her voice trembled. Cole thought of Mason. He thought of promises. He thought of lonely winters and empty rooms and the strange way life sometimes delivered exactly what people needed when they had stopped looking for it. Then he smiled softly. "Because somebody once taught me that family is everything." Rachel finally accepted the keys. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Emma threw her arms around her mother. Noah joined them a second later. Atlas stood and walked directly into the middle of the embrace. The German shepherd's tail wagged slowly as 4 lives came together in a sunlit room that no longer felt empty. And watching them from across the cottage, Cole realized something remarkable. He thought he was offering them a place to stay. But what he was really offering was a chance to begin again. Winter slowly surrendered to spring across the Wyoming plains. Snow retreated from the fields. Green returned to the hillsides. Wildflowers appeared along fence lines that had stood silent beneath ice only months before. The ranch felt different now. Alive. Every morning began with familiar sounds that had once been missing. Emma's laughter drifted through open windows. Noah's footsteps echoed across the porch. Rachel's voice carried from the cottage as she worked in the garden she had planted beside the front steps. And everywhere they went, Atlas followed. The German shepherd moved through each day with quiet purpose, checking on the children, accompanying Rachel through the fields, and spending long evenings beside Cole on the porch overlooking the valley. One warm afternoon, nearly 6 months after the storm, Cole sat in a wooden chair watching the sun settle toward the western horizon. The sky glowed with shades of gold, orange, and soft pink. Atlas rested at his feet. In the distance, Emma and Noah raced across the pasture chasing fireflies while Rachel called after them with a smile. The scene looked ordinary. Yet to Cole, it felt like a miracle. For years he had believed certain chapters of his life were finished forever. He believed loneliness was permanent. He believed some doors closed and never opened again. He had accepted that belief so completely he stopped questioning it. Then one snowy night, someone knocked on his door. Atlas lifted his head and watched the children running through the tall grass. His tail moved slowly against the porch boards. Cole smiled and scratched behind the dog's ears. "You knew before I did, didn't you?" Atlas responded by leaning closer. The answer seemed obvious. A few days later, Rachel brought a small wooden box to the porch. The box had belonged to her father. Inside were old photographs, letters, and keepsakes collected over decades. Together they spent the afternoon looking through them. One photograph showed Rachel as a little girl sitting beside her father near a fishing lake. Another showed Mason Reed smiling beside a younger Cole many years ago. The memories felt bittersweet at first. Then something unexpected happened. They stopped feeling like reminders of loss. They started feeling like reminders of connection. People leave pieces of themselves behind. In stories. In promises. In acts of kindness that continue long after they are gone. As the weeks passed, the ranch became more than a place to stay. It became home. Rachel found work in town. Emma joined a local softball team. Noah spent countless afternoons learning ranch chores from Cole. Atlas supervised all of it with the seriousness only a loyal German shepherd could manage. Visitors often laughed when they saw the dog following the family from one end of the property to the other. They joked that Atlas considered himself the manager of the entire ranch. Maybe he did. One evening, as summer approached, Emma sat beside Cole on the porch swing. The sky was filled with stars. Crickets sang from the fields. Atlas slept nearby. "Do you remember what I asked you?" she said. Cole glanced at her. "Which question?" Emma smiled. "About second families." Cole nodded slowly. "I remember." The little girl looked toward the cottage where warm light glowed through the windows. Rachel and Noah were preparing dinner. Laughter drifted through the screen door. Emma smiled. "I think I found mine." Cole felt emotion rise unexpectedly in his chest. He looked toward Atlas. The German shepherd opened one eye briefly before returning to sleep, completely content. The old ranch no longer felt empty. The extra chair beside the porch no longer looked abandoned. The silence that once filled every room had been replaced by life. And standing quietly behind it all was a promise written years earlier by a friend who believed family mattered more than anything else. As darkness settled gently across the valley, Cole removed Mason's letter from his pocket one final time. The paper had become worn from being read so often. He unfolded it and looked at the final line. "Keep the light on for them." Slowly, he smiled. Then he folded the letter and slipped it away. Across the yard, the porch light above the cottage glowed warmly against the evening sky. Children laughed. A dog slept peacefully. A family shared dinner together. And somewhere beyond the stars, perhaps an old friend was smiling too. Because sometimes home is not the place where your story begins. Sometimes home is the place where someone leaves the light on until you find your way there.